The reception hall was impeccable, decorated with white and gold flowers that reflected the soft light from the chandeliers. The groom looked over every detail, trying to calm his nerves as the guests arrived. His heart was racing, not just because of the ceremony, but because of the weight of everything this day represented. It was the start of a new life, and he wanted everything to be perfect. Soft background music filled the air, mixing with the low hum of animated conversations and laughter. The groom smiled, but inside, a growing tension was building, as if something was about to spin out of control. He took a deep breath, adjusted his tie, and tried to focus on the main reason he was there, his union with the woman he loved. Nothing should tarnish this day. As he greeted relatives and friends, he noticed their expectant looks directed at him. Everyone seemed to be sizing him up, just as it had always been in his life. He was used to being the center of his family's attention, the exemplary son. But today, that pressure felt heavier than ever. He wondered if he could keep up the act until the very end. The bride, stunning in her wedding dress, appeared in the hall, lighting up the room. The groom's heart warmed, and for a moment he forgot the tension. The sparkle in her eyes reminded him why he was there. It was for love, for partnership, for a future together. That was enough to give him strength. But deep down, something felt off. A quiet voice reminded him that his family rarely let special moments simply unfold in peace. The rivalry with his brother always surfaced at the worst possible times, and he feared that, somehow, it might happen again. He tried to push the thought away, believing that this time would be different. The ceremony moved forward, and every gesture seemed full of meaning. Their clasped hands, the looks they exchanged, the emotional vows. The guests applauded, touched, and the groom felt a wave of relief. Maybe he had been wrong. Maybe it really was possible to get through this day without any interference. During dinner, toasts were made, and close friends shared kind words. The groom felt increasingly confident that the worst was behind him. He raised his glass, gave thanks, smiled at everyone, and held on to the hope that this night would forever be remembered as a dream come true. However, when he saw his brother stand up with the microphone in his hand, a jolt of unease shot through him. He forced a smile, trying to believe it would just be another funny speech. After all, that's what you expect from a best man: a few light-hearted jokes, a fond memory, and good wishes for the couple. But inside, the groom couldn't quiet his apprehension. He knew his brother's sharp sense of humor, which always bordered on embarrassing. A heavy feeling settled in his gut. Was it just paranoia, or was this the beginning of something that would change everything? As the guests applauded his brother walking to the center of the room, the groom squeezed his wife's hand tightly. He couldn't explain it, but he was sure that this moment would decide how the rest of the night would go. And have you ever had that sinking feeling that something could ruin a perfect moment? Before we find out what happens at this wedding, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story brings emotions you won't want to miss. From a young age, the groom had learned that carrying the title of Golden Child came with a price. His parents constantly praised him, highlighting his good grades, his sense of responsibility, and his mature attitude. He felt proud, but he also felt trapped by this image he had to maintain at all costs. Being perfect wasn't a choice, it was an obligation. The younger brother, on the other hand, grew up in the shadow of this comparison. He was smart and creative, but more impulsive, and he was seen as the opposite. Every one of his failures was amplified. Every mistake was remembered as proof of his rebellious streak. Family gatherings always ended with the same old lecture: "Why can't you be more like your brother?" Those words weighed on him like chains. When they were younger, the groom tried to make things easier, defending his brother whenever he could.
But deep down, he liked the recognition he received. That inner conflict ate away at him. He wanted to help, but he also feared losing his status as the favorite. It was a silent struggle that shaped their relationship. Meanwhile, the younger brother piled up resentment. Every one of the groom's victories felt like a personal defeat. He saw himself as always coming in second place, condemned to live under constant comparison. The affection he should have felt for his brother became mixed with a jealousy that grew over the years. Their parents didn't realize the scale of what they were creating. To them, it was just a way to motivate. They didn't understand they were sowing the seeds of a deep rivalry that would surface at the most delicate moments. The groom knew this, but he never imagined those old wounds would be reopened on his wedding day. Memories from their childhood flashed through his mind as he watched his brother step up. Soccer games where he was always picked first, while his brother was left for last. Report cards proudly displayed at the dinner table, while the other's average grades were met with criticism. Small details that, together, had created a chasm between them. The younger brother, in contrast, had always tried to get attention in other ways. He was funny, creative, the one who made jokes that got the whole family laughing. But even this became a reason for comparison. Your brother is studious, and all you do is play around. The injustice of those comments was etched deeply into his memory. Over time, their relationship became polite but distant. The groom tried to keep the peace, while the brother hid his hurt behind sarcastic smiles. It was a silent agreement for the sake of coexistence, occasionally broken by arguments that were quickly smoothed over by their parents.
Now, with the microphone in his hand and all eyes on him, the brother had a chance to turn the tables. The groom knew it, and he feared the decades of resentment were about to come pouring out. The celebration was about to become the stage for a confrontation no one saw coming. The brother held the microphone confidently, smiling as if he were the star of the show. The hall quieted down, and all eyes turned to him. The groom kept his forced smile, trying to convince himself it would just be a lighthearted tribute. Even so, a chill ran down his spine. His opening tone was light, drawing laughs from the guests. The brother told childhood anecdotes, recalling funny situations and seemingly harmless moments. The audience laughed, relaxed, unaware of the discomfort growing in the groom's eyes. With every sentence, his anxiety mounted. "My brother was always Mom's favorite," he said, in a joking tone. Laughter echoed through the hall, but the groom felt his skin burn. This had always been an inside joke, but now it was being laid bare in front of everyone. The bride looked at him with a confused expression, trying to figure out the situation. The brother continued as if he hadn't noticed the unease. "While I got in trouble for the smallest thing, he was the angel of the house. Even when he messed up, our parents would make excuses to protect him." The words were delivered with a smile, but they carried poison. The groom clenched his fists under the table. The guests glanced at each other. Some laughed nervously, others just watched in silence. The groom could feel the atmosphere shift. It was no longer a celebration, but a public airing of secrets and resentments. With every second, the embarrassment grew. The bride, who had been calm, began to shift in her chair. She tried to smile, but her eyes searched her husband's face for answers. The groom knew she was absorbing every word, questioning if there was something hidden in his past. The confidence that was once solid began to crack. The brother, energized by the crowd's reaction, seemed oblivious to the damage he was causing. Or maybe he saw it, and that's exactly why he kept going. He spoke eloquently, as if this were the stage to finally free himself from years of silence. The microphone was his weapon, and he used it without hesitation. "And now he's here, marrying this wonderful woman. I hope she knows what she's getting into." The tone was joking, but the weight of the phrase plunged the room into an uncomfortable silence.
The groom felt his stomach turn. In that moment, what should have been a celebratory toast turned into a makeshift courtroom. The groom was in the defendant's seat, being judged by his own brother in front of everyone he loved. He knew this was only the beginning. Something inside him told him the worst part was still to come.
The brother took a deep breath and changed his tone of voice, like someone preparing for a final blow. The smile was still on his face, but his eyes revealed something else: years of pent-up hurt. The groom realized this wasn't just a funny speech, it was a public reckoning. You all know my brother as the responsible man, the perfect guy, the model son. But do you really know the whole story? The phrase echoed in the hall, and the guests held their breath. The groom's heart raced, and he felt his legs tremble under the table. He began to reveal stories from their teenage years, secret parties, lies told to their parents, minor mistakes that had never left the family circle. To the guests, they were funny anecdotes. To the groom, they were private memories being turned into a spectacle. Every detail he revealed felt like a stab. The groom could see the looks on people's faces changing, some surprised, some judgmental, and many just curious. The bride was frozen, trying to process everything she was hearing. With every sentence, her expression of admiration for her husband grew more uncertain. The reception hall, once lively, now felt suffocating. The groom's throat went dry, as if the air had vanished. His instinct was to stand up and snatch the microphone from his brother's hand, but he knew that would only make the spectacle worse. So he remained motionless, swallowing his anger. The brother, seeing the impact he was having, seemed to delight in the power of his words. He spoke as if it were a catharsis, airing his grievances, ironies, and resentments. For him, this wasn't just a speech, it was his chance to finally be heard. And the truth is, behind this image of the perfect son, there's someone just as human as the rest of us. It's just that no one ever wanted to see it. The final line was delivered with intensity, like an accusation. The room fell into absolute silence. The groom felt that his marriage, so newly begun, was being threatened before the night was even over. Everything he had built seemed to be crumbling under the weight of words that could now never be taken back. In that moment, he realized he wasn't just facing embarrassment. He was facing years of rivalry and resentment, all condensed into a single speech. And the worst part? This was only just beginning to unfold. The bride remained seated beside her husband, but her expression was no longer the same. The sparkle in her eyes had been replaced by a shadow of doubt. As the guests whispered discreetly among themselves, she sat perfectly still, trying to digest every word she had heard. The groom felt her hand slowly slipping away from his.
She watched him in silence, as if searching for answers in his face. The smile he maintained out of pure obligation couldn't hide his discomfort. The weight of her gaze was more painful than the laughter or judgment from the guests. For the groom, that loss of trust hurt more than the public exposure itself. When the hesitant applause ended and the brother handed back the microphone, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. The lightness was gone, replaced by a heavy silence. The bride leaned discreetly toward her husband and whispered, "Is it true, what he said?" The question hit him like a verdict. The groom swallowed hard. He knew answering right there would be useless, but the pleading look in her eyes made him even more distressed. It was as if the entire image he had built was being dismantled right before her eyes. It didn't matter if they were just minor mistakes from the past. The fact was, she had never heard those stories before. The guests began exchanging looks and whispering among themselves. Some chuckled quietly, others were clearly judging. The feeling of being at the center of a cruel spectacle intensified the groom's anguish. He didn't know if he should defend himself or just wait for the moment to pass. The bride tried to keep her composure, but her mind was racing. She thought of the vows they had exchanged just hours earlier, the promises of honesty and transparency. Now, everything seemed threatened by words spoken with malice. It was as if she had married someone she didn't fully know. Meanwhile, the brother smiled, satisfied, toasting with a few guests who still found the whole thing amusing. For him, it was just about laying all the cards on the table. For the groom, it was the ruin of one of the most important days of his life. The silence between the couple spoke louder than any words. The bride didn't need to say anything. The groom knew her trust was shaken. It was as if their marriage had begun with an invisible crack created right there in front of everyone. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to pull himself together. He knew he couldn't let the night end like this. But how do you fix something that was already so damaged? As the dinner continued, the groom struggled to maintain control. His mind was racing, but his body felt paralyzed. He smiled mechanically at the guests, responding to congratulations with short phrases. But inside, he felt shattered. Every distant laugh sounded like a mocking echo of his defeat. His chest burned, and his heart beat so hard he feared someone might notice. He looked at his brother, who was enjoying himself as if nothing had happened, and a contained rage consumed him. He thought about standing up and confronting him right then in front of everyone, but he knew that would only bring more chaos. The memory of every detail from the speech replayed in his head. The words cut like blades, repeating in an endless cycle. He felt ashamed, not just for himself, but for the embarrassment imposed on his bride and for the stain that now hung over their wedding.
With every minute that passed, the feeling of betrayal grew. The groom couldn't believe his own brother had chosen this day to make him the target of all his pent-up grievances. He thought of all the years he had tried to keep the peace, all the times he had let provocations slide. Now he saw that none of it had been enough. His body reacted in silence. His hands trembled, his breathing was heavy, and a cold sweat dripped down his forehead. He tried to pull himself together, but the urge to scream was almost uncontrollable. The conflict between keeping his composure and letting his anger out was tearing him apart. The bride noticed his state and placed a hand on his leg, a discreet gesture. It wasn't meant to comfort him, but a silent plea for him to keep control. He took a deep breath, trying to cling to that gesture like an anchor in the middle of the chaos. Still, he felt like he was about to explode. One thought hammered in his mind. If I don't react, everyone will believe him. If I do react, I'll ruin everything for good. It was a cruel dilemma with no apparent way out. Silence seemed like his only weapon, but also his greatest torment. He looked over at his brother again, who was toasting with friends as if he were the hero of the night. The contrast was unbearable. Him ruined, his brother triumphant. A flame of anger grew in his chest, and for the first time, he seriously thought about cutting all ties with him. In that moment, he realized something inside him had changed forever. Their relationship could never go back to what it was. And with every second that passed, the urge to lash out became harder to contain. It was only a matter of time before his anger found a way out. After dinner, when the music started again and the guests had dispersed, the groom found a chance to approach his brother. He walked over with firm steps, his heart still racing. His face held a fake smile, but his eyes betrayed the fury he was holding back. His brother greeted him with a quick hug, pretending everything was fine. "Relax, it was just a joke. You take everything so seriously," he said quietly, with an air of superiority. The groom took a deep breath, trying to cling to that gesture like an anchor in the middle of the chaos. Still, he felt like he was about to explode. He replied, "That wasn't a joke. You exposed me in front of everyone. The tension was palpable, even though their gestures seemed friendly. His brother raised his eyebrows and took a sip of his drink. "You were always the golden child. I thought you could handle a little ribbing." His tone was provocative, as if each word was chosen to dig the knife in deeper. The groom felt his blood boil. He tried to maintain control, aware that any outburst would draw attention from the guests, but his voice came out steady. "This was my day. You knew that, and you decided to ruin it." The brother smiled, leaning in closer. "Or maybe I just showed everyone that you're not as perfect as they think." With every phrase, the groom felt his anger intensify. It was clear his brother wasn't sorry. On the contrary, he seemed pleased with the damage he had caused. That attitude made it clear the speech hadn't been an impulsive mistake, but something calculated.
He stepped away for a moment, trying to pull himself together, but his brother's words echoed in his mind like knives. There was no ignoring it. The bond between them seemed to be fraying more with each second. What was once just a silent rivalry had now become a declared war. Across the reception hall, the bride watched the scene with apprehension. She saw the two of them exchanging words in low voices, but she could sense the tension in their gestures and expressions. She feared a full-blown argument could erupt at any moment. The groom took another deep breath and decided to end the conversation. "One day, you'll understand what you did here today." The brother just laughed, giving him a light pat on the shoulder, as if it were all a joke. But deep down, they both knew there was no going back. The loud music masked the heavy atmosphere between them, but for the groom, it was impossible to be distracted. The party continued, but his mind was stuck on that veiled confrontation, loaded with bitterness and resentment. He returned to his bride's side, trying to smile, but inside, he felt defeated. And he knew this war was only just beginning. As the night wore on, old memories began to flood the groom's thoughts. It was as if every word from the speech had unlocked a vault full of painful recollections. His mind traveled back to their childhood, replaying scenes he had always tried to bury. He remembered the times he was congratulated for his high grades, while his brother was criticized for not achieving the same results. He recalled how his mother would proudly display his certificates, while his brother's creative drawings were dismissed as just a hobby without a future. Every detail now seemed cruelly unfair. Memories surfaced of family games where he was always the team captain, and his brother was relegated to being picked last. He remembered dinners where his parents praised his mature demeanor, but made light of his brother's mischievous antics. What once felt like routine now revealed the roots of a deep-seated resentment. It dawned on the groom that, without meaning to, he himself had fed the rivalry. Although he tried to defend his brother in some situations, he also silently accepted the praise that put him on a pedestal. Deep down, there was a secret pleasure in being seen as the family's role model. These memories mixed with his current anger, creating an unbearable weight. For the first time, he understood the scale of his brother's resentment. But that didn't lessen the pain of being publicly humiliated. On the contrary, it made everything even crueler. As he watched his brother laughing with other guests, the groom felt a mix of guilt and hatred. He knew his brother's wounds had deep roots, but he believed the wedding was not the moment to air that bitterness. His brother's choice turned old hurts into revenge. The bride noticed his distant look and asked softly, "Are you okay?" He smiled mechanically but didn't answer. Inside, he was fighting a storm of conflicting emotions. His parents, distracted with the guests, seemed to notice nothing. To them, it was just a bit of drama, like so many other fights between brothers. Their indifference only made the growing chasm between the two brothers feel wider. As the party continued with music and dancing, the groom knew this wedding would never be remembered as just a day of celebration. It was now marked by the memory of a past that had brutally resurfaced. And deep down, he felt there were still more revelations held by his brother, waiting for the right moment to explode. The groom tried to keep his composure, but inside he felt shattered. It was then that his parents approached him, wearing strained smiles. His mother, always concerned with appearances, whispered, "Don't ruin the party, son. Your brother was just joking." Those words, instead of comforting him, felt like another stab wound. He looked at his father, hoping for support, but only got an evasive nod. "Let it go. Today is your wedding. Focus on your wife." Their indifference only reinforced the feeling that his pain didn't matter. It seemed that once again, they expected him to be the one responsible for keeping the peace. In the background, his brother was laughing with some cousins as if nothing had happened. The scene made the groom's outrage grow even stronger. He felt like everyone was minimizing his pain, turning a public humiliation into something trivial. It ate away at the last shred of calm he had left. The bride watched everything in silence, clearly seeing the tension. To her, it was unsettling to see her husband's parents make excuses for their younger son. The situation revealed family dynamics she hadn't been aware of. She was beginning to understand that the speech was just the tip of the iceberg. The groom took a deep breath, trying to swallow the lump in his throat. "Don't you see what he did?" he asked in a low, almost pleading tone. But his mother just smiled, squeezing his hand. "People will forget. Tomorrow no one will be talking about this." He knew it wasn't true. Inside him, a feeling of isolation grew. Not only had his brother betrayed him, but now his parents were clearly showing they wouldn't support him. He was alone in the midst of his own family. The weight of it was unbearable. As the guests kept dancing, he stepped away for a few moments, trying to catch his breath. The reception hall seemed smaller, suffocating. Every smiling face seemed fake, as if everyone was laughing at his expense.
The bride went to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to face this alone," she said softly. That phrase was a relief, but also a reminder. If he didn't act soon, he could lose her trust forever. His parents, in the distance, pretended nothing was wrong. But in the groom's heart, something was shifting. He was beginning to realize that this night wasn't just about his wedding. It was about breaking a cycle of silence and comparisons that had existed since childhood. And for the first time, he felt the urge to confront everyone, no matter the cost. Later, away from the main hall, the groom and bride found a moment of privacy. She took his hand and led him to a side corridor, away from curious eyes. Her gaze was firm, full of love, but also full of doubt. "I need to know, is what he said true?" she asked in a low voice. The groom felt his heart tighten. He knew he couldn't simply deny it. The stories revealed were real, even if maliciously twisted. His prolonged silence only increased his wife's anguish. With effort, he began to speak. He admitted to some past mistakes, explained the contexts, tried to show they were things from his youth that had nothing to do with the man she knew today. But he realized that for her, the problem wasn't the past itself, but the fact that it had been kept from her. "Why did you never tell me?" she asked, her tone more sad than accusatory. He didn't know how to answer, maybe out of shame, maybe out of fear of losing the image of perfection he had always carried. This time the silence weighed even heavier. She crossed her arms, taking a deep breath.
I didn't marry a perfect man. I married you, but I need to know that you're honest with me." Her words hit him hard. It was a reminder that trust was on the line, more than any social reputation. The groom held her hands and apologized. He promised he wouldn't hide anything anymore, that from that moment on he would be completely transparent. The emotion in his voice was genuine, and that made her expression soften. But a shadow of uncertainty remained. As they hugged, he realized that his brother hadn't just shaken his image in front of the guests, he had also planted a seed of doubt in his marriage. That hurt more than anything else. The bride, in turn, understood that something bigger was at play, deep family wounds that went beyond that single night. And she knew that sooner or later she would have to take a side in this silent war. The groom walked away with one certainty: he could no longer avoid the confrontation. If he wanted to save his marriage and his dignity, he would have to face his brother directly.
And this time, it wouldn't be in hushed tones, hidden backstage. It would be a direct confrontation, without any masks. The groom, calmer now after talking with his wife, began to observe his brother's behavior more closely. He noticed that he didn't seem nervous or sorry, but rather satisfied, like someone who had accomplished a goal. This set off an alarm in his mind. In quick conversations with a few cousins, the groom discovered that his brother had mentioned, before the wedding, that he was going to give an unforgettable speech. Some had laughed, thinking it would be an over-the-top joke. But now, in light of what happened, it was clear it had been premeditated. The groom also remembered old text messages where his brother had made ironic comments about the wedding. "You were always the perfect one. Let's see how long she puts up with that act," he had written in a joking tone. In this new context, those words took on a different meaning. The realization was painful. His brother hadn't just improvised. He had planned every detail as a way to get back at him for years of comparisons and favoritism. The wedding wasn't the target itself, but the perfect stage to expose his accumulated frustration. This discovery brought a mix of anger and clarity. The groom understood he wasn't dealing with a simple, tasteless joke, but with retaliation. His brother wanted, in some way, to tarnish the most important day of his life to balance the scales. The bride was shocked to hear this analysis. "So he did it on purpose?" she asked, outraged. The groom nodded, his expression heavy. "Yes, he wanted to take me down. And he succeeded." The silence that followed was suffocating. Later, as he watched his brother dancing and having fun, the groom realized he couldn't just ignore it. This was too personal, too deep. He needed answers. He needed to understand how far his brother was willing to go. It was time to take off the mask and expose the true intentions hidden behind the sarcastic smile. And this time, there would be no audience to hide behind. It would be a direct confrontation without witnesses, but loaded with truths that had been buried for years. The groom found his brother alone near the bar, already with another glass in his hand. He approached him, determined, not caring who might hear. "Why did you do it?" he asked, his tone firm but controlled. The brother looked up slowly, a provoking smile on his face. Finally decided to stop pretending everything's fine. The response was like adding fuel to the fire. The groom felt his face grow hot and his anger rise. "You knew this was my day. Why turn my wedding into a stage for your bitterness?" The brother shrugged, taking another sip of his drink. "Maybe because your entire life has been a stage set up by our parents." The words hit like punches. The brother continued, his tone now more aggressive. "Did you ever realize how suffocating it was to be constantly compared to you, always the perfect one, the favorite, while I was an afterthought? Do you think that's fair? Do you think I didn't have a right to speak up?" The groom shot back, his voice choked with emotion. "I never asked to be the favorite. Do you think it was easy carrying that image? I suffered too, just in a different way." For the first time, their wounds were laid bare.
without a filter. The brother laughed, a bitter sound. You suffered, while everyone applauded you? Don't make me laugh. What you call a burden, I called being invisible. The silence that followed these words was heavy, almost unbearable. The argument escalated, both speaking loudly, until some guests started to notice. The bride rushed over, trying to intervene, but the tension was so high, neither man seemed to hear her. It was as if years of resentment were finally overflowing. "You didn't just ruin my wedding," the groom shouted, tears in his eyes. "You ruined our relationship. Maybe we can never go back to being brothers." The brother stood still for a few seconds, as if those words had struck him deeply. But instead of backing down, he replied coldly, "Maybe that's for the best. We were always rivals, never real brothers anyway." The silence that followed those words was sharp enough to cut. The bride held her husband's arm, trying to pull him away. The groom was breathing heavily, as if he had just finished a battle. In that instant, he realized what was destroyed that night went far beyond a party. It was the family bond that perhaps could never be rebuilt. After the explosion with his brother, the groom walked away from the reception hall and looked for a quiet place. He sat on a bench in the outside garden, trying to catch his breath. His mind was spinning in circles. How could the party go on after all that? How could he continue his wedding with the shadow of that revelation hanging over everyone? He thought about what his wife had said earlier, about honesty. That thought stung. For years, he had tried to maintain the image of perfection, believing it was what everyone expected. Now he saw that this very burden was pushing away the people he loved the most. In that moment, it became clear he needed to choose: continue living under the weight of his family's expectations, or finally be his authentic self, owning up to his flaws. The first option seemed easier, but also unbearable. The second would be painful, but perhaps the only one capable of saving his marriage. The bride approached and sat beside him. At first, she didn't say anything. She just held his hand. The silence was filled with understanding, but also with expectation. He knew she was waiting for action, for a definitive decision.
The groom took a deep breath and said, "I can't live up to appearances anymore. If I want to start this life with you, I need to be honest, even if it means disappointing my family." The words came out with difficulty, but with sincerity. She looked him in the eyes and replied, "I don't want a perfect man. I want a real husband." That phrase was like a key that unlocked the weight he had been carrying. For the first time, he felt he didn't need to uphold the title of golden child anymore. Even so, the decision was risky. Breaking the image his parents had created could mean a permanent distance from them. And with his brother, there might be no going back. But the groom knew he had no choice. It was time to take ownership of his own life. He wiped his tears and stood up, determined. "It's time to speak the truth. For you, for my family, and for myself." The bride nodded, holding his hand firmly. In that instant, the groom stopped being just the man pressured by comparisons. He became someone ready to face his past, even if it meant breaking bonds that had seemed unbreakable. Back in the reception hall, the groom asked for the microphone. His heart was pounding, but his voice came out steady. All eyes turned to him, curious and tense. The guests were still whispering about the earlier scene, but now a silence fell over the room. He began by thanking everyone for coming, but soon changed his tone. "Today was supposed to be just the happiest day of my life, but it ended up being the day I had to face truths I'd been hiding even from myself." His words surprised the audience, who listened intently. The groom spoke in his own words about the mistakes of his youth, the slip-ups and the flaws. He denied nothing,
but he didn't let them be used against him either. "I'm not perfect. I never was. And if anyone believed that, it's because I tried to maintain that image, and I was wrong." The bride, standing beside him, squeezed his hand tightly. The gesture conveyed her support, showing everyone that, despite the revelations, she was still by his side. That detail made many guests see the situation in a new light. He then looked directly at his brother, who was leaning against the back wall with his arms crossed. "You wanted everyone to see that I'm not the perfect favorite. Well, now everyone sees. But know this, it doesn't make you less. I don't want to compete with you. I never did." The words didn't erase the resentment, but they created a heavy silence. The brother looked away, unsure how to react. For the first time that night, he seemed uncomfortable.
The groom continued, this time looking at his parents. "You always compared us. You always demanded that I be the example. That hurt us more than any mistake we made as kids. Today I'm saying I don't want to live like that anymore. I just want to be who I am, with my strengths and my flaws." A few guests started to applaud timidly, and soon the gesture spread throughout the room. The groom felt an enormous weight lift from his shoulders. He hadn't erased the pain of the night, but he had taken a step toward a more honest new beginning. The bride hugged him, emotional, and whispered, "Now I feel like I've really married you." Those words were the true relief he needed to hear. His brother, however, remained silent, carrying with him grievances that hadn't yet been resolved. But for the first time, he seemed to be reflecting on his own choices. The music started again, but the mood in the room was different. The groom's speech had changed the course of the evening. Many guests came up to congratulate him on his courage, praising his honesty. There were still whispers, of course, but now with a tone of respect, not just curiosity. The bride, radiant despite the tension, stayed by his side the entire time. Her gaze was firm, full of renewed confidence. It was as if their bond had been strengthened by facing this unexpected crisis together. The marriage, rather than being weakened, seemed more solid. His parents, on the other hand, looked uncomfortable. His mother, especially, was visibly shaken by her son's words. For the first time, she seemed to realize that the comparisons she made between her two sons had left deep scars. His father, silent, just watched, unable to argue. His brother, isolated in a corner, remained serious. His posture showed wounded pride, but also a quiet reflection. He hadn't expected the groom to react that way, to let go of his perfect image and embrace his humanity. It was a different kind of victory than the one he had imagined. The groom, though relieved, knew the wounds weren't healed. His relationship with his brother had reached a critical point, perhaps one there was no coming back from. But inside, he felt he had made the right choice, to be true, not just for others, but most importantly, for himself. When the party came to an end, the couple left the hall hand in hand. The groom looked back one last time, seeing his family together, yet divided. He knew that this wedding would be remembered not just as the start of their life together, but also as the day the family's secrets came to light. In the car, the bride hugged him and said, "No matter what happens from here on out, we'll face it together." That phrase echoed in his heart like a bomb. For the first time in a long time, he felt free from the weight of being the perfect son. Back inside the hall, the brother was still drinking in silence. Deep down, he carried the bitterness of a revenge that hadn't brought him satisfaction. The war wasn't completely over,
just dormant. The groom knew new challenges would come, but he also knew he was ready, no longer as the perfect example, but as a real man, willing to face the consequences of being who he truly was. And so, between exposed wounds and fragile bonds, his marriage began, not perfect, but real. Not all toasts celebrate, some destroy. This was the night a wedding turned into a family reckoning. Want to follow more intense stories like this, full of twists and revealed secrets? Then subscribe to the channel now and get ready, because the next one might be even more surprising.